The village sat at the edge of the savannah, where the wind carried stories from the past. It was a place where the earth whispered secrets, and the trees were ancient guardians. The people knew that the land was alive, that the animals spoke to the spirits, and that every tree and stone had meaning. The village had lived in harmony with the spirits for generations, and those who honored the old ways were blessed with protection and prosperity. But those who ignored the spirits' presence were doomed to face their wrath. The elders spoke often of this balance, for the land was both a gift and a warning. It was a place where the sacred and the everyday walked hand in hand, and at the heart of it all stood Mzee Amadi, the village elder. Mzee Amadi's face was lined with years of wisdom, his hands gnarled from holding the memories of countless seasons. He often sat by the sacred fire, his voice steady and full of power, speaking to the villagers of the spirits that watched over them. "The spirits are not far," he would say, his eyes gleaming with the knowledge of 1,000 lifetimes. "They walk among us. They guide us, and they punish us when we forget our place." The younger villagers listened, some with respect, others with doubt. They were caught between the teachings of the old ways and the pull of a world that promised more. Kofi, the son of the village, was one of them. Kofi was a man with dreams that stretched beyond the village's borders. His eyes sparkled with the fire of ambition. He believed the village was trapped in the past, bound by traditions that held them back. "The world is changing," he would say with a voice full of hope and certainty. "We cannot stay here forever, living in fear of the spirits. The city has machines, tools, ways to grow strong. We need progress." Kofi's vision was bold, and it frightened many. The elders whispered in corners, worried about his disregard for the land's ancient power. But Kofi was determined. He saw the old ways as chains that kept the village from reaching its true potential. He spoke of new farming techniques, of modern homes, of roads that would connect them to the world beyond the savannah. Some villagers followed him, excited by the promise of a new future, while others watched in silence, unsure of what would come. Among those who watched was Amina, Kofi's younger sister. Amina had a deep connection to the village's past. She was the keeper of the stories, the one who sang the songs and performed the dances that honored the spirits. The old ways were her heartbeat, and she could not bear to see them tossed aside so easily. Amina felt the land beneath her feet, the wind in her hair and the whispering trees. The spirits were not something to be forgotten. They were a part of the land, and they had protected their people for generations. To disrespect them was to invite disaster. But Kofi refused to listen. She tried to warn him. "Kofi, you are blinded by your dream," she said, her voice trembling. "The spirits are real. They protect us, and they are watching. If you ignore them, you will bring misfortune to us all." But Kofi only shook his head. "You are stuck in the past, Amina. We cannot live in fear of old stories. The spirits are not real. They are just tales to keep us from moving forward." And so the village was divided. On one side were those who wanted change, who believed that progress was the only way forward. On the other were those who held to the old ways, fearful that abandoning them would anger the spirits. Days passed, and the land began to speak. The crops that had always flourished started to wither. The animals grew restless, wandering aimlessly through the village. The elders gathered around the fire, whispering of the signs. "The spirits are angry," Mzee Amadi said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "They have been dishonored. The land is sick." Kofi dismissed the warnings. "The land will recover. We need to move forward, not backward." But Amina could feel the shift in the air. The winds carried a strange chill. The trees seemed to whisper with unease. The village was in danger, and she feared that Kofi's path would lead them to ruin. Mzee Amadi's health began to fail. The once strong elder grew weaker by the day, his voice faint, his steps slow. The villagers feared that the spirits had begun to take their toll. The land had turned against them, and the future seemed uncertain. Kofi, however, pressed on. He had organized a grand festival to celebrate the changes he had brought to the village. "This is the future," he proclaimed, standing before the people. "This is the beginning of a new era." But as the festival began, the air grew colder. A wind like no other swept through the village, carrying whispers of warning. Amina's heart raced. She knew the spirits were angry, and she feared the consequences of crossing a line they had never crossed before. The festival continued, the music loud and the laughter bright, but Amina could not shake the feeling that something terrible was coming. Then came the day that would change everything. Kofi made the decision to cut down the sacred trees, the trees that had stood for generations, the trees where the spirits lived. He believed that by clearing the land, the village would be free to grow and expand. But the moment the axes struck the first tree, a deep silence fell over the village. The air grew heavy, and the land seemed to tremble. Amina watched in horror as the trees fell, one by one. The spirits were angry now. She could feel it in her bones. The wind howled and the sky darkened, as if the earth itself were mourning the loss of the sacred grove. The villagers stood still, some in shock, others in fear. They knew the village had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The land had been disrespected, and the spirits would demand a price. And so, as the silence stretched across the village, Amina felt a deep ache in her heart. The spirits were stirring, and the village's fate now hung in the balance. Kofi stood before the village leaders, his voice strong, filled with passion. "The time for change has come," he declared. "We must not be bound by old ways. The land is holding us back. I have seen it in the cities, machines, new farming techniques, and homes built strong and steady. We can have this too. We must cut down the sacred trees and clear the land. Only then will the land give us what we need." The village elders exchanged uneasy glances. Manzi Amadi, the oldest of them all, stepped forward. "Kofi, you speak of progress, but progress without respect for the spirits is a dangerous thing. These trees are where our ancestors rest. To cut them down is to insult them, and the land will not forgive us." Kofi shook his head. "The spirits are not what they once were, Manzi. It's time to move forward. The spirits can't feed our children or give us stronger homes. Only new methods will do that." Some of the villagers nodded, eager to follow Kofi's vision of a new life, but others stood still, their faces drawn with worry. Amina, Kofi's younger sister, watched in silence. She could feel the weight of her family's love and the village's traditions pulling at her heart. But she also saw her brother's determination, and it scared her. She wanted to support him, but deep inside, something told her that this path would bring disaster. Amina's dreams became darker. At night she saw shadows rise from the earth and heard whispers of sorrow. The spirits, restless and angry, called her name in her sleep. One night she awoke from a nightmare, gasping for breath. "The spirits are angry," she whispered to herself. She knew her brother's actions were causing the rift in the village, but how could she stop him? How could she make him understand? The next day, Amina went to the river. She knelt by its banks, her fingers brushing the water. "Please," she whispered, "I do not want to lose my brother, but I fear the spirits will take away everything we love." She stood up and looked around, but all she saw were the village's trees, growing weaker. The animals had become sick. The once thriving land had started to show signs of decay. Amina's heart sank. She had been right. The spirits were stirring, warning them all. Kofi's changes had started to take effect. The village, once peaceful and vibrant, had started to show signs of imbalance. The crops were withering and the animals were sick. Kofi pushed on, determined to prove that his way was the only way forward. "The land will be prosperous once we clear the trees," he said, walking through the village with a determined stride. "We are not children anymore. We need modern tools, not the old ways." But the elders, sensing the growing unrest, gathered at the sacred fire that night. "The spirits are angry," Mziamadi said, his voice filled with concern. "The land is sick because of what has been done. If we do not change our ways, we will all suffer." Kofi refused to listen. "You speak of things that do not matter anymore. We are building for the future. I will not turn back." But the whispers of the spirits grew louder. The trees began to groan, and the river that had always been calm began to rise in anger, splashing against its banks. A deep, unnerving silence began to spread through the village. The festival that Kofi had planned was now upon them. He stood at the front of the gathering, his chest puffed with pride. "Tonight we celebrate the future," he announced. "A new era for our village, one that will bring strength, wealth, and prosperity." But as night fell and the music began to play, the wind shifted. A cold gust swept through the village. The firelight flickered, and the shadows grew deeper. Amina stood at the edge of the gathering, watching. Her heart raced. The chill in the air was not from the wind. It was the spirits. She could feel them, angry, restless. And as the festival continued, she saw the faces of the villagers turn from excitement to fear. She walked over to Mziamadi, her voice low. "The spirits are watching, Mzi. I fear that tonight marks the point of no return." Mziamadi's face was grim. "The spirits are angry, child, but it may already be too late." The next day, Kofi ordered the destruction of the sacred grove, the place where the spirits of the ancestors resided. The trees were ancient, older than any of the villagers. The grove was sacred to them, a place to honor their connection to the land. But Kofi saw only the land as a tool. "We need space to grow," he said, his voice full of certainty. "The trees are just in our way." As the axes fell on the ancient trees, a deep silence filled the air. Amina stood at the edge of the grove, tears streaming down her face. The ground seemed to shake beneath her feet. She felt as if the spirits themselves were crying. The villagers stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Some felt the shift in the air, others remained blind to the consequences. But Amina knew that they had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. That night, the wind grew cold and harsh. It howled through the village like a warning from the spirits themselves. The animals went quiet, and the trees seemed to bend under the weight of their sorrow. Even the moon, usually bright and full, now seemed dim and distant. Amina stood outside, her body trembling from the cold. She looked up to the sky, whispering, "The spirits are angry. The village is in danger." As the night wore on, the earth seemed to hold its breath. The villagers could feel the tension in the air, a heaviness that pressed down on their hearts. Kofi, however, dismissed the signs. "The spirits are nothing but stories. They can't harm us." But Amina knew better. She could feel it deep within her. Something terrible was coming. The next day, Mziamadi fell ill. His once strong body weakened by a fever that no healer could cure. He lay on his mat, muttering in delirium. "The spirits have heard the disrespect. They will come when the time is right." The villagers were shaken. Kofi, though, still dismissed the warning. "Mzi is old, that is all. We must move forward." But even Kofi's voice was not as certain as it once was. Deep inside, he felt the weight of what had been done, though he refused to admit it. Amina could not stay silent any longer. She went to the elders, pleading for them to act. "Please," she cried. "The spirits are angry and I fear the village is lost. We must make amends." Mzee Ahmadi, weak though he was, took her hand. "It is not too late, child," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "But the spirits will demand a great sacrifice. Only humility and repentance can heal this wound." Amina's heart trembled. She knew that the village's future now depended on a choice, the choice to listen to the spirits or to continue down a path that could destroy them all. The time was running out. The sky darkened as if the heavens themselves were angry. Amina looked up and saw the clouds gathering, swirling into a thick black mass. A strong wind blew through the village, shaking the trees and sending dust swirling into the air. The animals were not calm. The cattle bellowed and the goats bleated wildly as though they could feel the fear in the air. "Something is coming," Amina whispered, feeling the chill in the air. The wind screamed like a wild beast. Mzee Ahmadi's words echoed in her mind. "The spirits are angry, and they will come for what has been taken from them." The trees shook violently, their branches twisting in the wind. Amina stood frozen, knowing that the spirits were near. The villagers gathered, huddled together in fear. Everyone could feel it. The storm was not just a storm, it was a reckoning. Kofi stood tall, determined. "Do not be afraid, we can fight this," he shouted to the villagers, his voice strong but trembling slightly. He motioned for the workers to gather their tools, their machines. "We will build walls, dig trenches, and protect our homes. These new tools will save us from whatever comes." The villagers looked at each other, torn between their trust in Kofi and their fear of the spirits. Some hesitated but followed Kofi's orders. Kofi turned to Amina. "You see, sister, modern ways will protect us. The storm cannot break our walls." He seemed to believe it, but his words lacked the confidence they once had. But the storm didn't slow. It only grew stronger. The wind howled louder, almost mocking their efforts. The sky seemed to get darker, as though the sun had been swallowed whole. The machines they had trusted groaned and sputtered, their metal parts rattling in protest. Amina's heart sank. She had warned him. The spirits were not to be defied. Without warning, the river, once calm and steady, began to rise. Its waters surged, flooding the banks and racing toward the village. The ground trembled as if the earth itself was breaking apart. The villagers screamed in panic, running to save their homes. Kofi watched helplessly, his eyes wide with disbelief. This can't be happening. Our tools should work. The machines should save us." But the floodwaters were unstoppable. The fields were submerged, the crops drowned in seconds. The very land that Kofi had tried to control was now turning against him. The elders looked at each other, their faces filled with fear. Mzee Ahmadi whispered, "The spirits have risen. The land has spoken." Amina felt a pang of guilt and sorrow. Her brother's pride had brought this disaster. The village was drowning in the consequences of his defiance. Then, the earth trembled once more, but this time, it was not the storm or the river, it was the animals. The lions roared, the elephants trumpeted, and the baboons screamed. They came from the forest, charging through the village like wild demons. The villagers scattered in fear, but the animals were fast, too fast. Lions tore through homes, smashing huts and chasing people. The elephants stomped through crops, crushing everything beneath their massive feet. Even the birds flew in a frantic, threatening pattern overhead. The village was consumed by chaos. The animals, once peaceful, once a part of village life, had turned into fierce instruments of vengeance. The villagers tried to defend themselves, but nothing could stop the animals' fury. Amina ran to Kofi. "This is it, brother," she cried, her voice breaking. "This is the spirit's anger. We cannot fight this. We must listen to them." But Kofi stood firm, his eyes blazing with defiance. "I will not bow to superstition. We can rebuild. We must rebuild." But even as he spoke, the animals continued their rampage. Birds circled in the sky like harbingers of doom, their cries deafening. The storm raged on, and the village fell into complete ruin. Then, out of the mist, the spirits began to appear. Shadowy figures moved silently among the ruins, their forms barely visible in the storm's fury. Amina saw them. She heard their whispers, soft but clear. "You have forgotten us, and now you will pay." She could feel the weight of their words, the ancient warning. The spirits had come. They had waited long enough, and now they were reclaiming what was theirs. Kofi, unable to see the spirits, stood still, his face clouded with confusion and anger. "These are just the winds, the storm," he muttered. "Nothing more." But the village knew. The spirits were no longer silent. The air was thick with their presence. As the storm grew stronger, Kofi's modern buildings began to fall apart. The walls he had worked so hard to build were torn apart by the winds, ripped to shreds like paper. The tools that had promised so much failed him, their gears grinding to a halt, useless against the force of nature. Kofi dropped to his knees, his hands trembling. "No, no, this isn't possible," he screamed. "We had everything. We had progress. Why is this happening?" The wind screamed louder, as if mocking him. Amina stood beside him, her heart heavy. "It's the spirits, Kofi. They are stronger than anything we can build. They are the protectors of this land." Kofi's face crumbled with regret, the weight of his actions finally sinking in. His dreams of change, of progress, had led them here. He had thought he could control the land, but now the land had controlled him. Mzee Ahmadi, though frail and weak, rose from his bed, struggling against the storm's power. His voice, though faint, carried across the wind. "The spirits will not forgive us if we do not show them respect." Amina rushed to him, kneeling by his side. "What can we do, Mzee? How can we save the village?" Mzee Ahmadi raised his hand weakly. "We must pray. The spirits will listen to our prayers. But you must speak from the heart, Amina. You must ask for mercy." Amina stood up, her heart heavy with grief and fear. She looked at Kofi, her eyes full of sorrow. "We must do this. Please, Kofi. For the village, for our people. We must ask for forgiveness." Kofi looked at his sister, the stubbornness in his eyes slowly fading. He looked at the destruction. Around him, the village torn apart by the spirit's wrath. He knew, deep down, that he had failed. He fell to his knees beside Amina, his voice breaking. "I was wrong. I thought I could change everything. But now I see what I did. I've brought this upon us." Amina stood tall, her voice shaking as she called out to the spirits. "Spirits of our ancestors, forgive us. Forgive my brother's pride and our disrespect. We have lost our way, but we beg for your mercy. Please restore balance to our land." The wind paused, and for a brief moment, the storm seemed to quiet. The animals stopped their attacks. A soft, golden light broke through the clouds, casting a brief but peaceful glow over the village. The spirits were listening. But even as the storm began to calm, Amina knew the price had already been paid. The land had been hurt, and the spirits had claimed their due. Yet there was hope. The village would heal, but only if they truly understood the lesson. The price of progress was not worth the cost of forgetting the old ways. The storm had passed. The winds, which had howled with fury, now lay still. The village was quiet, but the damage was clear. Broken homes, flooded fields, and shattered lives lay scattered across the land. But amid the destruction, something strange happened. In the sacred grove where ancient trees once stood tall, there was now a single tree growing. It was young, but its branches reached high, as if it were offering hope to the people. It stood alone, but it was a sign from the spirits. Amina stepped forward, her eyes wide with wonder. "Look, brother," she whispered, pointing to the tree. The spirits have shown us mercy. Kofi looked at the new tree, his heart heavy with guilt. He had been wrong. The river had calmed, its waters flowing gently again. The animals, which had once attacked the village in a frenzy, now moved peacefully, grazing and playing as they always had. The village, broken and bruised, felt the presence of the spirits. The earth had been angry, but now there was a chance to restore balance. The villagers gathered around the new tree, feeling the weight of what had happened. They had learned a hard lesson. The spirits did not seek to destroy, but to remind them. The spirits had offered them a second chance. "We could have been wiped out," one elder said, his voice trembling. "But the spirits have given us a path to heal. They have not taken everything from us. We are still here. We can rebuild." Kofi stood at the edge of the gathering, listening. He had always thought he knew better, but now he saw the truth. The spirits had given them not destruction, but an opportunity to make things right. Kofi walked slowly to the elders, his shoulders heavy with shame. He knelt before Mzee Amadi, the village elder, and spoke with a quiet voice. "I was wrong," Kofi said, his voice trembling. "I thought I could change everything with my machines and ideas. But I see now that I was disrespecting the land and the spirits. I have failed you all." Mzee Amadi looked down at Kofi, his eyes soft with wisdom. "It is not too late, my son. The spirits have not destroyed us, but they have shown us the way. We must walk that path together." Amina, standing beside her brother, spoke with calm wisdom. "Kofi, true progress is not in leaving behind the old ways. It is in finding a way to honor both the past and the future. We can build a better village, but we must remember where we come from." Kofi looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. "You are right, Amina. I have learned much today. I will walk the path of balance." As the village began to rebuild, there was a new sense of unity. Kofi worked alongside the elders, helping to restore the village. But this time, it was different. He no longer sought to replace the old ways with new ideas. He wanted to build a future that respected both the earth and the spirits. The villagers learned to blend the old and the new. They used modern farming tools, but they also honored the rituals that had kept them safe for generations. They rebuilt slowly, carefully, with respect for the land. Kofi, once so proud and stubborn, now worked with humility. He knew that the strength of the village came not from machines, but from the community, from the spirits, and from the land itself. Mzee Amadi called the village together. His body was weak, but his voice still carried the weight of generations. "The spirits have shown us mercy, but they have also given us a lesson," he said. "They did not come to destroy, but to remind us of the balance we must keep. We cannot move forward without remembering the past. We must respect the earth, the spirits, and the wisdom of our ancestors." The villagers listened in silence, each person feeling the power of his words. Mzee Amadi looked around at them, his gaze steady. "Progress is not in forgetting the old ways. Progress is in learning from them and moving forward with respect." Kofi stood, his heart heavy with understanding. "I will remember Mzee, I will remember the spirits, and I will teach my children to remember too." The village, though scarred, began to heal. They rebuilt their homes, their fields, and their lives. But now there was something more. They had learned that true growth comes not from abandoning the past, but from building a future that honors it. The spirits had shown them the way, and now it was up to them to follow. Kofi had learned a hard lesson, but it was a lesson that would shape the village for generations to come. The spirits had not sought to destroy, but to guide. They had shown mercy, but the village knew they could never forget what they had learned. The path forward was clear. The village would grow, but it would grow with balance, honoring the past while embracing the future. And so, the village rebuilt. The tree in the sacred grove grew taller, its branches reaching for the sky, a symbol of the village's new beginning. The spirits had shown mercy, and the people had learned their lesson. True progress comes only through respect for the land, the spirits, and the wisdom of the ancestors.